I'm Bernard, 32, and I never thought a burst appendix would reveal the truth about my family. That night in the ER, terrified and alone, I sent one message to our family group chat: emergency surgery. I'm scared. Their response: a beach selfie with sending good vibes. Nobody showed up during my week-long hospital stay. Then, still weak in my hospital gown, I checked my phone, 79 missed calls and a text from Mom: call back now. Everything's falling apart. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from, and hit that subscribe button to hear how I finally stood up for myself, after years of being taken for granted. Before my appendix decided to explode and change everything, I was living what seemed like a successful life in Seattle. As a software engineer at a growing tech company, I had the kind of career my parents could brag about at their country club gatherings. My apartment overlooked Lake Union. I drove a nice car, and from the outside everything looked perfect. But beneath the surface, something was always missing. My relationship with my family had always been complicated. My mother, Sandra, was a high school principal. My father, Robert, ran his own accounting firm, and my younger sister, Diana, was finishing graduate school in psychology. We were the picture-perfect American family on paper, but the reality was much different. From an early age, I learned that love in our family came with conditions. My parents had sky-high expectations, but rarely offered emotional support. Good grades weren't celebrated, they were expected. Achievements weren't met with praise, but with questions about what was next. I remember bringing home straight, as in high school, only for my father to ask why I wasn't taking more advanced classes. Despite this, I desperately wanted their approval. I chose engineering because my father thought it was practical, even though I had dreamed of studying literature. I took the job in Seattle because it paid well, not because it fulfilled me. Every decision was filtered through the lens of, would this make my parents proud? My sister Diana had a different experience. 3 years younger than me, she somehow escaped the pressure I felt. Her B grades were acceptable. Her changing majors 3 times in college was finding herself. When she needed money, my parents were quick to help. Meanwhile, I had worked through college, refusing to ask for assistance even when I ate ramen for weeks straight to make rent. The irony wasn't lost on me that, despite being treated differently, I was the one who always showed up for family obligations. I flew home for every holiday. I remembered every birthday with thoughtful gifts. I called my parents weekly to check in. When my father needed help setting up his new office network, I took 3 days off work to fly home and handle it. When my mother's car broke down, I researched and found her the best replacement in her budget. My apartment in Seattle was beautiful but often felt empty. I worked 60-hour weeks, partly because I loved solving complex problems, but mostly because it gave me less time to notice how lonely I felt. My social circle was small but meaningful. Marcus, my college roommate, who now worked at a rival tech company, lived nearby, and we met for beers most Thursdays. Jessica, from my department, often joined us along with Carlos, who I knew from a coding boot camp years ago. They were good friends, but I kept even them at a distance. Years of conditional love had taught me to compartmentalize, to never fully let anyone in. When they asked about my family, I kept stories light and positive, never revealing the underlying tension. 3 months before my appendix burst, my family had started planning a trip to Florida. My mother had always wanted to see the Kennedy Space Center, and my father had some college friends in Miami they could visit. Diana, between jobs again, was excited about the beaches. They invited me, of course, but the trip coincided with a major product launch at work. I couldn't possibly take the time off. We understand completely, my mother had said on the phone, but her tone suggested disappointment. Work always comes first for you anyway. That stung, considering how many important work events I'd missed over the years to be present for family functions. But I swallowed my frustration as usual and promised to join them next time. The week before they left, I sent them a care package of travel essentials, premium sunscreen, a good travel pillow for my dad's bad neck, a waterproof phone case for Diana, who always dropped hers, and a guidebook for my mother, who still preferred paper to digital. I even arranged for a car service to take them to the airport. "You're always so practical, Bernard," my mother said when she called to thank me. Not warm, not loving, just practical. I had learned to accept these crumbs of acknowledgement. The day they left for Florida, I threw myself into work even more intensely. The product launch was crucial, and as technical lead, everything fell on my shoulders. I started arriving at the office at 6 in the morning and leaving well after midnight. My team was concerned, but I assured them I was fine. "You need to take better care of yourself," Marcus told me during one of our rare Thursday meetups that I almost canceled. "All this work and no play is going to catch up with you." I laughed it off. "I'll rest when the launch is over," I promised. Little did I know that my body was already planning a forced rest period that would change everything. It started on a Tuesday night. I had been at the office until nearly 11, debugging a persistent issue with our authentication system. When I finally got home, I felt a slight discomfort in my lower abdomen. Nothing serious, just a dull ache that I attributed to stress and too much coffee. I took some over-the-counter pain relievers and went to bed certain it would be gone by morning. I woke up at 3 a.m. in agony. The dull ache had transformed into a knife-like pain in my lower right abdomen. When I tried to stand, I nearly collapsed. Something was seriously wrong. Despite the pain, I managed to get dressed and grab my keys. The thought of calling an ambulance briefly crossed my mind, but years of self-reliance kicked in. I could drive myself to the emergency room. The 20-minute drive to Swedish Medical Center was excruciating. Every bump in the road sent waves of pain through my body. By the time I staggered into the emergency room, I was sweating profusely and struggling to remain upright. The triage nurse took one look at me and immediately called for assistance. "Right lower quadrant pain, fever, nausea," she reported to the attending physician who arrived moments later. "Possible appendicitis." Dr. Ashley Chen was efficient and direct. After a quick examination that left me gasping in pain, she ordered immediate blood tests and a CT scan. The results came back within the hour, confirming her suspicion. "Your appendix has ruptured," she explained, her face serious. "We need to get you into surgery immediately. The infection can spread quickly throughout your abdominal cavity and become life-threatening." The gravity of the situation hit me all at once. I was facing emergency surgery alone in the middle of the night. For the first time in years, I felt genuine fear. As they prepared me for surgery, I asked a nurse if I could use my phone for a moment. With shaking hands, I opened our family group chat and typed a simple message: "Emergency surgery. I'm scared. Appendix burst." At Swedish Medical. In the moments before anesthesia took hold, I checked my phone one last time. One new message had appeared in the group chat along with a photo. My family all smiles on a sunny Florida beach, cocktails in hand. The message read, "Sending good vibes. You'll be fine. Hospitals are amazing these days. Keep us posted." That was the last thing I saw before the anesthesia pulled me under. I woke up hours later in the recovery room, groggy and disoriented. The surgery had gone well according to the recovery nurse, but because my appendix had already ruptured, they needed to clean out the infection from my abdominal cavity. I would need to stay in the hospital for several days on intravenous antibiotics. As awareness returned, so did the memory of my family's response. I checked my phone again, hoping for something more, but there were no new messages from them. Instead, I had texts from Marcus, Jessica, and Carlos, all of whom had somehow heard about my situation and were concerned. Just heard from Jessica. "What the hell, man, which hospital I'm coming?" Marcus had written. "OMG, Bernard, just saw your emergency contact info when HR called me. Are you okay? Do you need anything? I can come after work," Jessica had sent. "Bro," Jessica told me what happened. "I'm in Portland for a conference, but I can be back tomorrow if you need me," Carlos had texted. Their concern brought tears to my eyes. I quickly replied to let them know I was okay but would be hospitalized for several days. Then I returned to the family chat where my emergency message sat alongside their beach photo with no further inquiries about my condition. I debated sending another message but decided against it. If emergency surgery wasn't enough to warrant their concern, what would be? That first day post-surgery was a blur of pain medication and brief moments of consciousness. By the evening, the gravity of my situation had fully set in. The doctors explained that the rupture had caused significant contamination, and I was at risk for serious complications, including sepsis. I would need close monitoring and aggressive antibiotic treatment. Through it all, a young nurse named Tyler was my constant support. He checked on me frequently, adjusted my pain medication when needed, and even sat with me during his break when he noticed I had no visitors. "No family coming?" he asked gently. "They're out of town," I replied, not wanting to admit the truth. "What about friends?" "They're coming tomorrow," I said, grateful that at least that part was true. Marcus had confirmed he would visit after work the next day. I spent that night drifting in and out of sleep, interrupted by nurses checking my vitals and administering medications. During one wakeful period, I sent another message to the family group. Surgery went okay, but appendix had already ruptured. They're worried about infection spreading. We'll be here for several days. The response came 3 hours later, while I was being helped to walk slowly around the hospital floor as part of my recovery. Another beach photo, this time of a beautiful sunset. "Gorgeous evening here, glad surgery went well. These antibiotics are amazing these days, you'll be fine in no time." No questions about how I was feeling. No offer to cut their vacation short. No acknowledgement of the seriousness of my condition. When I returned to my room, I found Marcus waiting, concern etched on his face. He had brought my laptop charger and some comfortable clothes from my apartment. "Jesus, Bernard, you look terrible," he said, setting down a bag of my belongings. "Why didn't you call me when you first felt sick?" I attempted a smile. "It all happened pretty fast." "Your family flying back?" he asked, assuming what any normal person would. I hesitated, then shook my head. "They're in Florida. It's a trip they've been planning for months." Marcus's expression darkened. "So they're staying there, even though you just had emergency surgery?" "It's not that serious," I lied, downplaying the situation, even though Dr. Morales had just explained the risks of peritonitis and sepsis to me that morning. "Bullshit," Marcus said. "I talked to your doctor on the way in. He told me how serious this is." He pulled up a chair next to my bed. "Have they even called?" I shook my head again. "That's messed up, Bernard. Really messed up." For the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge the truth of his words. It was messed up. My family's response was not normal, not acceptable. But admitting that meant confronting a lifetime of similar disappointments that I had carefully rationalized away. As the days passed, my physical condition slowly improved while my emotional state deteriorated. My friends visited regularly, bringing books, magazines, and takeout food when I was finally allowed to eat. Jessica even organized a rotating schedule so someone would check on me daily. My family called once on speakerphone from a restaurant in Miami. I could hear music and laughter in the background as they took turns briefly speaking to me. "The doctors say you're doing fine, right?" my father asked, clearly distracted. "We were thinking of extending our trip by a few days since we're having such a wonderful time," my mother added before I could even answer his question. "Bring me back a souvenir," Diana chimed in, as if I were away on a fun trip rather than fighting a serious infection in a hospital bed. After 5 minutes, they hung up, promising to call again soon. They didn't. The physical recovery from a ruptured appendix is slow and painful. Dr. Morales explained that because the infection had spread before surgery, my body needed time to heal from both the surgical procedure and the internal contamination. Every morning he would check my incision site, test my abdomen for tenderness, and review my blood work for signs of continued infection. "You're making progress," he would say, "but we need to be patient. This isn't something to rush." Patience had never been my strong suit, especially when it came to personal needs. I was used to pushing through discomfort, to putting work and others first. Now confined to a hospital bed, I had no choice but to focus on my own healing. The hospital staff became my unexpected support system. Tyler, the night nurse, would check on me during his shifts and sometimes stay to talk when things were quiet. Rebecca, the day nurse, was equally attentive, bringing extra pillows without being asked and explaining each medication and procedure in detail. "You're a model patient," she told me on my 4th day. "Most people complain a lot more." "I'm used to handling things on my own," I replied. She gave me a knowing look. "That's not always a good thing, you know. Sometimes we need to let others help us." Her words stayed with me long after she left the room. Marcus and Carlos visited daily, sometimes together, sometimes taking turns depending on their work schedules. Jessica came by every evening after work, often bringing small gifts, a new tech magazine, a portable chess set, once even a homemade smoothie, because I had mentioned craving fresh fruit. "Any word from your family?" Carlos asked on the 5th day as he set up the chessboard between us. I shook my head. They called once. They're still in Florida. And they're not coming back early. His disbelief was evident. They're extending their trip actually, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Carlos placed the chess pieces with more force than necessary. That's cold, man. If my brother were in the hospital, I'd be on the first plane home. Later that evening, my phone chimed with a video call request from the family group. I answered to see them gathered on a restaurant patio, the ocean visible in the background. They were dressed for dinner, my mother in a flowing dress, my father in a linen shirt, Diana wearing large sunglasses despite the setting sun. "We thought we'd check in," my mother said brightly. "How's the hospital food?" "It's hospital food," I replied, adjusting my position in bed to hide the IV line still delivering antibiotics. "You look tired," my father observed. "I am tired. Fighting infection takes a lot out of you." "Well, the doctor said you're going to be fine, right?" Diana asked, taking a sip of what looked like a mojito. "Eventually, yes. It was pretty serious, though. My appendix ruptured before they could remove it. But they got it all cleaned out," my mother said dismissively. "That's the main thing." They proceeded to tell me about their parasailing adventure that morning, the amazing seafood restaurant they'd discovered, and the boat tour they had booked for the following day. Not once did they ask how I was feeling emotionally, if I needed anything, or when I might be released. After they hung up, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a revelation slowly dawning. This call, like so many interactions before it, followed the same pattern. I was expected to show interest in their lives, to celebrate their joys, to support their endeavors. But when I needed emotional support, when I was vulnerable and hurting, they maintained a safe distance. That night, Tyler found me awake at 3 a.m., tears silently streaming down my face. "Pain bad?" he asked, immediately checking my chart. "Not physical pain," I admitted. He pulled up a chair. "Want to talk about it?" And surprisingly, I did. I told him about my family, about their beach vacation continuing while I lay in a hospital bed, about years of showing up for them while they consistently failed to show up for me. "Have you ever told them how this makes you feel?" he asked when I finished. "No," I confessed. "It always seemed easier to just accept it." "Easier for whom, them or you?" The question lingered in my mind long after he left. The next morning, Rebecca arrived with a social worker named Grace, who specialized in patient support. "Tyler mentioned you might benefit from talking to someone," Rebecca explained. "Grace helps patients deal with the emotional aspects of recovery." I was initially resistant, but Grace's gentle approach broke through my defenses. We talked about my family situation, about patterns of giving and taking, about healthy versus unhealthy relationships. "What would happen," she asked, "during our second session if you stopped being the one who always gives?" "They'd be upset," I said immediately. "And why would that be bad?" I had no ready answer. "Bernard," she continued, "relationships should have balance. It's not your job to constantly accommodate others at the expense of your own well-being." That afternoon, I made a decision. I would not reach out to my family again during my hospital stay. I would focus on my recovery and see if they would notice my silence. Hours passed, then a full day. No messages from them. By the second day of silence, my phone began to show missed calls from my mother, then text messages asking why I wasn't responding. Not messages of concern about my health, but complaints about my lack of communication. "We've been trying to reach you. Why aren't you answering? Your sister wants to tell you about her dolphin encounter. Call back. Bernard, it's rude to ignore your family." I let them all go unanswered, focusing instead on my physical recovery. By the 7th day, Dr. Morales was pleased with my progress. "The infection is under control, and your incision is healing nicely," he said during morning rounds. "If your blood work continues to improve, we can consider discharging you tomorrow." The prospect of going home filled me with both relief and anxiety. I was tired of the hospital, but uncertain about managing alone during recovery. Marcus immediately offered to help when I shared the news. "I can pick you up and get you settled at home," he said. "Jessica already stocked your fridge yesterday, and I can crash on your couch for a couple of days if you need someone around." His offer touched me deeply. "You guys don't have to do all this." "We want to," he insisted. "That's what friends are for." That evening, as I began gathering my few belongings, my phone lit up with yet another call from my mother. This time I answered. Finally, she exclaimed, "We've been worried sick." I doubted that very much. "I've been focusing on recovery," I said. "Well, we're heading home tomorrow. The vacation was absolutely wonderful, but all good things must end. When will you be discharged?" "Tomorrow, actually. Perfect timing. We can stop by to see you on our way from the airport." The old Bernard would have accommodated them, would have welcomed their brief visit on their terms. But I was no longer that person. "Actually, I said I need to rest after discharge. How about we talk in a few days when I'm feeling stronger?" Her surprised silence spoke volumes. Marcus picked me up from the hospital the next morning as promised. Dr. Morales provided detailed discharge instructions emphasizing the need for rest, proper nutrition, and limited physical activity for at least 2 weeks. I would need to return for a follow-up appointment and continue oral antibiotics to ensure the infection was completely resolved. "You've been through a serious medical event," Dr. Morales reminded me. "Your body needs time to heal completely. Don't rush back to your normal routine." The drive to my apartment was quiet, with Marcus carefully avoiding potholes and taking turns slowly to minimize discomfort. When we arrived, I was touched to discover that my friends had been busy in my absence. The apartment was spotlessly clean. Fresh flowers sat on the coffee table, and as promised, the refrigerator was stocked with easy-to-prepare meals. Jessica organized everything Marcus explained, as he helped me settle onto the couch. Carlos handled the cleaning. We wanted to make sure you could focus on recovery. For someone used to being the caretaker, being cared for was a novel experience. It felt uncomfortable but also deeply moving. "I don't know how to thank you guys," I said, emotion making my voice rough. "Just get better," Marcus replied simply. "And maybe learn to ask for help sometimes before you end up in the hospital." The first few days at home established a new rhythm. Marcus stayed over the first 2 nights, sleeping on my couch despite my protests. Carlos visited daily, often bringing lunch from my favorite places. Jessica called every evening to check in, and even arranged for grocery delivery when supplies ran low. I began taking short walks around my apartment building, gradually increasing the distance as my strength returned. Dr. Morales had emphasized the importance of gentle movement for recovery, and I was determined to follow his instructions precisely. My work had been understanding about my absence with my manager Ryan, insisting I take the full 2 weeks of medical leave before even considering working remotely. It was the longest I'd been away from work since college, and the forced break gave me time to think about many aspects of my life that I had been too busy to examine. True to their word, my family returned from Florida and called to share details of their amazing vacation. My mother spoke for 20 minutes about the Kennedy Space Center. My father described in detail the golf courses he had played, and Diana gushed about her dolphin encounter and beach parties. When they finally asked about my recovery, I gave brief factual responses. Yes, I was home from the hospital. Yes, the doctors were pleased with my progress. No, I didn't need them to visit yet. I was still resting most of the day. "Well, let us know when you're up for visitors," my mother said, sounding relieved rather than disappointed. "Diana's job hunting is keeping her busy anyway, and your father has a backlog of work after being away." After hanging up, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset over Lake Union, contemplating the patterns that had defined our family dynamic for decades. I had always been the reliable one, the one who showed up, who helped, who put others first. And in return, I received token acknowledgement at best, complete disregard at worst. Grace, the hospital social worker, had given me resources about setting boundaries and recognizing unhealthy relationship patterns. As I began reading through them, I saw my family dynamic described with unsettling accuracy: the uneven expectations, the emotional distance, the conditional support that disappeared when inconvenient. 10 days after returning home, I felt strong enough to begin working remotely for a few hours each day. My team was supportive, handling the most demanding tasks so I could ease back in gradually. I found unexpected joy in the slower pace and taking lunch breaks on my balcony and ending work at a reasonable hour to read or watch a movie. Then exactly 1 week after my discharge, everything changed again. My phone exploded with notifications all at once. 32 missed calls from my mother, 27, from my father, 20, from Diana, and numerous text messages. The most recent was from my mother: "Call back now. Everything's falling apart." My heart raced as I scrolled through the messages, expecting news of a serious family emergency. Had someone else been hospitalized? Was there an accident? The truth was both simpler and more revealing of our family dynamic. Diana had been counting on a job that fell through, leaving her unable to pay the security deposit and first month's rent on an apartment she had already signed a lease for. She needed $8,000 immediately, or would lose the apartment and forfeit her application fees. My parents had spent more than planned on their Florida vacation and couldn't cover the full amount. They needed me to contribute $4,000 to solve Diana's crisis. In the past, I would have immediately transferred the money, perhaps with a gentle suggestion that better planning might avoid such situations in the future. I had the savings. $4,000 wouldn't break me financially, but something had fundamentally shifted during my time in the hospital. The contrast between my friend's unhesitating support and my family's continued self-absorption had crystallized a truth I had been avoiding for years. I called my mother back. Finally, she answered on the first ring. "Did you get our messages? Diana is in a terrible situation." "I saw the messages," I replied calmly. "Why is this an emergency that required 79 calls to me while I'm recovering from major surgery?" Her tone immediately changed from urgent to defensive. "Well, you weren't answering, and this is important. Diana will lose her deposit if we don't get the money by tomorrow." "I understand that's stressful for her," I said, maintaining my calm. "But I'm still recovering, Mom. I'm on medical leave from work. I nearly died from a serious infection while you were all extending your vacation." "That's a bit dramatic, Bernard," she scoffed. "The doctors said you would be fine." "After emergency surgery and a week of IV antibiotics," I countered, "which none of you seemed concerned enough about to even cut your trip short by a day." "We were on vacation," she said, as if that explained everything. "And you're changing the subject. Diana needs help. Can you transfer the money today or not?" The old Bernard would have backed down, would have sent the money to keep the peace. The new Bernard, still wearing loose clothes to avoid pressure on his healing incision, took a deep breath. "No," I said simply. "I can't do that today." The silence on the other end was profound. "What do you mean, no?" she finally asked, disbelief evident in her voice. "I mean, no, I can't send $4,000 today. I'm still recovering from a major medical event that none of you seemed particularly concerned about. I need to focus on my health right now. But Diana will lose her apartment." "Then Diana will need to find another solution," I said. "Perhaps she could look for a place with a lower deposit or get a short-term rental until she finds a job." "I can't believe you're being so selfish," my mother said, her voice hardening. "After everything we've done for you." That phrase, so familiar, yet so inaccurate, finally broke something loose inside me. "What exactly have you done for me, Mom?" "When I was in the hospital for a week with a life-threatening condition, you sent beach selfies. You extended your vacation rather than coming to help. My friends showed up every day. They cleaned my apartment, stocked my fridge, drove me home, and checked on me constantly. What did my family do?" "That's different," she protested. "We were already away, and you're an adult, you can handle yourself." "So is Diana," I pointed out. "She's an adult who can handle herself too." "We'll discuss this when your father gets home," she said, clearly flustered by my unexpected resistance. "He'll want to talk to you directly." After she hung up, I sat in silence, processing the conversation. For the first time in my adult life, I had refused a family request. The sensation was both terrifying and liberating. My phone rang again 20 minutes later. This time it was my father. My father's voice was stern, the tone he had used throughout my childhood when I had disappointed him. "Your mother tells me you're refusing to help your sister." "Hello to you too, Dad," I replied, determined to maintain my composure. "How are you? How am I?" "Still recovering from emergency surgery. Thanks for asking." "Don't be smart with me, Bernard," he snapped. "Diana is in a crisis, and we need to resolve this as a family." "I agree it's a family matter," I said, "but I'm questioning why it's an emergency that requires me to transfer money immediately without discussion, while I'm still on medical leave." "Because the deadline is tomorrow," he said, exasperation clear in his voice. "Diana will lose her deposit and the apartment if we don't pay." "And when did Diana sign this lease?" 2 weeks ago," he admitted after a pause. While I was in the hospital, I noted, "Did anyone think to discuss this major financial commitment with me then?" "You were sick," he said dismissively. "We didn't want to bother you with it. But now that it's a crisis, I'm suddenly well enough to be bothered." My father sighed heavily. "Look, Bernard, sometimes family members need help. That's what family does. When your mother and I needed help with the network at my office, you stepped up. When Diana needs financial assistance, we step up. That's how it works." "That's not how it's worked at all, Dad," I said quietly. "I've always been the one stepping up. When was the last time any of you inconvenienced yourselves for me?" "That's ridiculous. We've supported you your entire life." "When I was a child, yes. But as an adult, when I needed emotional support during my hospitalization, you all sent beach selfies. When I needed someone to help me get home from the hospital, my friends stepped up. Not my family. We were on vacation," he said, repeating my mother's excuse. "People cut vacations short for family emergencies all the time," I pointed out. "A ruptured appendix and abdominal infection qualifies." The conversation continued in circles with my father, alternating between dismissing my concerns and trying to guilt me into providing the money. Finally, I interrupted his latest attempt. "Dad, I'm still recovering and this conversation is exhausting. I've made my decision. I'm not sending money today. Diana needs to learn to handle her own financial situations just as I've had to do." "This isn't over," he warned before hanging up. I spent the rest of the day in a strange emotional state, swinging between guilt and a growing sense of empowerment. By evening, I had received several more calls from my mother and text messages from Diana, expressing her disappointment in my selfish behavior. The next morning, a loud knocking at my door startled me awake. When I opened it still in my pajamas, I found my entire family standing in the hallway. My father looked angry, my mother concerned, and Diana tearful. "We need to talk," my father announced, pushing past me into the apartment. "This situation has gone far enough." Caught off guard by their ambush, I followed them into my living room, where they had already seated themselves, my father in my favorite reading chair, my mother and Diana on the couch. "You look terrible," my mother said, eyeing me critically. "Are you taking care of yourself properly?" The irony of her concern now after their complete absence during my hospitalization was not lost on me. "I'm recovering from major surgery," I reminded her. "It takes time." My father cleared his throat impatiently. "We're here about Diana's situation. The deadline is today, and we need to resolve this." I took a seat at my dining table, intentionally creating distance between us. "I'm listening." "Diana needs $4,000 for her apartment," he stated. "Your mother and I can provide $4,000, but we need you to match it." "And if I don't?" I asked. "Then she loses the apartment, and the money she's already put down." My mother interjected. "Is that what you want for your sister?" Diana sniffled dramatically on cue. I took a deep breath, feeling my surgical incision pull slightly with the movement. "What I want is for my family to recognize that relationships go both ways. When I was in the hospital fighting an infection that could have killed me, none of you cut your vacation short to be with me. Not one day." "We called," Diana protested. Once I corrected. "For 5 minutes from a restaurant on speakerphone. Meanwhile, my friends visited daily, brought me things I needed, cleaned my apartment, stocked my refrigerator, and made sure I got home safely." "We would have done those things if we weren't away," my mother said defensively. "But you were away by choice," I pointed out. "You chose to stay on vacation rather than support me during a medical emergency. That was your decision, and it showed me exactly where I stand in this family's priorities." "So this is revenge?" my father asked incredulously. "You're punishing Diana because you're mad at us?" "No," I said firmly. "This is me recognizing an unhealthy pattern and choosing not to perpetuate it. For years, I've been the one who always shows up, who always helps, who always gives. And when I needed you, none of you showed up for me." "That's not fair," Diana interjected. "I've had problems too, and you know it. My anxiety makes it hard for me to handle stress." "We all have problems," I replied. "The difference is that I've been expected to handle mine independently while simultaneously helping with everyone else's." "So you won't help?" my father demanded, his face reddening. I didn't say that, I clarified. I said I won't transfer $4,000 today without discussion while I'm still recovering from surgery. What I will do is help Diana look for more affordable housing options or help her create a budget once she finds a job. That's not what she needs right now, my mother insisted. Maybe not, I acknowledged. But it's what I'm willing to offer. Diana stood up suddenly, tears streaming down her face. I can't believe you're being so cruel. After everything I've been through. My father stood as well, placing a hand on Diana's shoulder. If this is how you feel, Bernard, perhaps we need to reconsider our family relationship entirely. The threat hung in the air between us. In the past, it would have been enough to make me capitulate immediately. Instead, I felt a curious calm. If that's your decision, I'll respect it, I said quietly. But I hope instead that this can be the beginning of a more balanced relationship between us all. Let's go, my father, said to my mother and Diana, ignoring my response. Bernard clearly needs more time to think about his priorities. They filed out of my apartment, without another word, Diana's theatrical sobs echoing in the hallway. As the door closed behind them, I felt both drained and strangely liberated. I called Marcus immediately. They just ambushed me at my apartment, I explained after briefly recounting the situation. Holy shit, he replied. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over? No, I'm actually okay. I realized, somewhat surprised by the truth of it. For the first time, I stood my ground with them. Good for you, man. That's been a long time coming. My dad basically threatened to cut me off if I don't give Diana the money. And how do you feel about that? Marcus asked carefully. Sad, I admitted. But also relieved. Like maybe this needed to happen. After we hung up, I spent the afternoon reflecting on the confrontation. Years of suppressed feelings had finally surfaced, and while the outcome wasn't what I would have chosen, it felt like an important first step towards something healthier. That evening, I drafted a lengthy email to my family explaining my feelings more clearly than I had been able to during our heated conversation. I detailed the hurt I had felt during my hospitalization, my realization about our unbalanced family dynamic, and my hope that we could build something better moving forward. I love you all, I concluded, but I need to love myself too. I'm ready to be part of a family where everyone supports each other, not just a family where I'm expected to solve everyone's problems while my needs go unaddressed. I hope we can find a way to create that together. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my phone and went to bed early, exhausted by the emotional toll of the day. The next morning, I reached out to Grace, the hospital social worker who had given me resources on boundary setting. She connected me with a support group for people dealing with difficult family dynamics. Attending my first virtual meeting later that week was eye-opening. Hearing others describe experiences so similar to mine made me feel less alone in my struggle. Days passed with no response from my family. Diana apparently found another solution to her housing crisis, though I only learned this through a mutual family friend. The silence was painful, but also gave me space to continue my physical and emotional healing without the constant drain of family drama. 2 weeks after our confrontation, as I prepared to return to work part-time in the office, I finally felt ready to face whatever came next in my family relationship. The uncertainty was uncomfortable, but for the first time in my adult life, I felt I was standing on solid ground of my own making. 2 weeks of silence from my family stretched into a month. During this time, my physical recovery progressed steadily. The follow-up appointment with Dr. Morales confirmed that the infection was completely resolved and my incision was healing well. He cleared me for normal activities, though he cautioned against heavy lifting or intense exercise for another few weeks. You've recovered remarkably well, he told me. Just remember that internal healing takes longer than what we can see on the surface. His words seemed applicable to more than just my physical condition. Returning to work part-time, then eventually full-time, brought its own challenges and rewards. My team had managed admirably in my absence, and my manager Ryan suggested I use this opportunity to establish better work-life boundaries. You were working 60-hour weeks before your appendix burst, he reminded me. Maybe that's not sustainable. I took his advice to heart, leaving the office by 6 most evenings, and reclaiming my weekends for personal activities. With this newfound time, I began exploring interests I had long neglected. I signed up for a cooking class, something I had always wanted to try, but never made time for. I rediscovered my love of reading fiction, working my way through novels I had purchased years ago, but never opened. My social connections deepened as well. The Thursday beer nights with Marcus expanded to include weekend hiking trips when I was strong enough. Carlos introduced me to his community basketball league, where I started as a spectator but eventually joined in casual games. Jessica and I discovered a shared interest in documentary films and began attending a monthly screening series at a local independent theater. Through the support group Grace had connected me with, I met Rachel, a counselor who specialized in family relationship dynamics. Our initial professional conversations gradually evolved into friendship, and I found her insights invaluable as I navigated my new reality. Family patterns don't change overnight, she reminded me during one of our coffee meetings. You've disrupted a system that's been in place for decades. There will be resistance. Do you think they'll ever understand my perspective? I asked. Some family members might eventually, she said thoughtfully. Others might not. The important thing is that you understand it and honor your own needs. 6 weeks after our confrontation, my mother called unexpectedly one Sunday afternoon. I had just returned from a short hike with Marcus, feeling energized and positive. Bernard, she said when I answered her voice, uncharacteristically hesitant. How are you? I'm doing well, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. How are you, and Dad, and Diana? We're managing, she said after a pause. Diana found a different apartment with a roommate. Your father and I helped with the deposit. I'm glad she found a solution, I said sincerely. An awkward silence followed before my mother spoke again. I read your email. Several times, actually. This surprised me. I had assumed my lengthy explanation had been dismissed or deleted unread. I've been thinking about what you said, she continued, about how we weren't there for you when you were in the hospital. I waited, not wanting to interrupt what seemed like a difficult acknowledgement for her. I didn't handle that well, she admitted. We should have come back when we heard about your surgery. I can see that now. Her words caught me off guard. In all my years, I had rarely heard my mother acknowledge a mistake. Thank you for saying that, I responded, emotion making my voice rough. It means a lot to hear you say it. I can't speak for your father or Diana, she added quickly. But I've been reflecting on our family dynamics. The things you said, there might be some truth to them. We talked for nearly an hour, the longest, most honest conversation we had ever had. She shared her own struggles with expressing emotion, a trait she had inherited from her parents. She acknowledged that she had often taken my reliability for granted while making excuses for Diana's challenges. Would you be willing to meet for lunch next week? She asked toward the end of our call. Just you and me. I agreed, cautiously optimistic but realistic about the road ahead. Our lunch was tentative but productive. My mother asked detailed questions about my hospitalization and recovery, listening attentively to experiences she had previously minimized. I shared honestly about how their absence had affected me, and for once she didn't become defensive or dismiss my feelings. Your father is having a harder time with this, she confessed over dessert. He was raised to believe that family obligations are absolute. The idea that you might set conditions on your support is difficult for him to accept. I'm not setting conditions on love, I clarified. I'm asking for reciprocity in our relationship. There's a difference. She nodded slowly. I understand that better now. I'm trying to help him see it too. Diana proved to be the most resistant to our changing family dynamic. When I finally spoke with her 2 months after our confrontation, she vacillated between tearful apologies and subtle attempts to re-establish the old patterns. I really am sorry I wasn't there for you, she said during our coffee meeting. I was just going through so much with my job situation and apartment hunting. You know how anxiety affects me. I understand you were dealing with your own challenges, I acknowledged. But that doesn't mean my medical emergency should have been ignored. I know, she sighed. I've been working on being less self-focused. My therapist says I need to develop more empathy. This was new information. You're seeing a therapist. She nodded. After everything that happened with the apartment situation, Mom suggested I might benefit from professional help with my anxiety and financial management issues. This was an unexpected but welcome development. Perhaps the family system was changing in ways I hadn't anticipated. As the weeks passed, I maintained contact with my family, but with new boundaries firmly in place. I declined invitations that didn't respect my time or needs. I offered help when I could genuinely provide it without self-sacrifice. I expressed my feelings honestly rather than swallowing disappointment to keep the peace. Some interactions were awkward, others downright difficult. My father and I had several heated discussions before reaching a tentative understanding. Diana cycled through guilt, anger, and eventually a grudging respect for my new boundaries. My mother surprisingly became an ally in rebuilding our family relationships on healthier terms. 3 months after my appendix burst, my friendship with Rachel evolved into something more. Our shared interest in psychology and family dynamics had created a foundation of mutual understanding, and our coffee discussions gradually transformed into dinner dates and weekend outings. I never expected to find a relationship because of my appendix, I joked during one of our early dates. Life has a strange way of bringing good things out of difficult situations, she replied. Sometimes we need to be broken open to find a better way forward. My 33rd birthday arrived 4 months after my surgery. In previous years, I would have received perfunctory calls from my family and perhaps taken myself out for a quiet dinner alone. This year, Marcus and Carlos organized a small gathering at my favorite brewery, with Jessica, Rachel, and several other friends joining the celebration. To my surprise, I also received a text message from my mother. "Your father and I would like to host a family dinner for your birthday this weekend if you're available. No pressure, just an invitation." The old Bernard would have immediately rearranged his schedule to accommodate this request. The new Bernard checked his calendar, noted plans with Rachel on Saturday, and replied that Sunday would work if that suited them. "Sunday is perfect," my mother responded. "We're looking forward to it." It was a small thing, this exchange, but it represented a fundamental shift in our family dynamic. For the first time, my existing plans were acknowledged as valid, my time respected as valuable. It wasn't everything, but it was a beginning. As I blew out the candles on the cake my friends had surprised me with, I made a silent wish, not for anything material, but for the strength to continue this journey of self-discovery and healthy relationships. The road ahead would undoubtedly have bumps, but for the first time in my life, I felt equipped to navigate them without losing myself in the process. The Sunday birthday dinner with my family marked a turning point in our relationship. My mother had prepared my favorite foods, complete with a homemade chocolate cake that she knew I preferred over store-bought. My father, though still somewhat reserved, made an effort to ask about my work and recovery without his usual judgment. Even Diana seemed more attentive, asking thoughtful questions about my hiking trips with Marcus, rather than immediately steering the conversation to her own concerns. "We have something for you," my mother said after dinner, sliding a small wrapped package across the table. Inside was a framed photograph from my high school graduation, a moment when I had genuinely felt proud and supported by my family. Along with it was a handwritten card from each of them. My mother's note was the most revealing. "Bernard, I'm sorry it took your appendix bursting for me to realize how much I've taken you for granted over the years. I'm learning to be a better mother to the son I already have, not just the son I thought you should be. I love you exactly as you are. I won't pretend that this single dinner healed decades of dysfunctional patterns. Rebuilding our relationship was a slow, often challenging process. There were still misunderstandings, occasional slips into old behaviors, and moments of frustration on all sides. But there was also a new foundation of honesty and mutual respect that made the effort worthwhile. Over the following months, we established new traditions and expectations. Sunday dinners became a monthly occurrence rather than an obligation whenever they decided to call. When I visited, I set clear timeframes rather than leaving it open-ended. When they asked for help, I evaluated whether I could genuinely provide it without resentment, sometimes saying yes, sometimes offering alternatives, sometimes simply saying no. My father gradually came to accept this new dynamic, even expressing grudging admiration for my boundary setting during a rare one-on-one lunch. "You remind me of my own father," he said unexpectedly. "He never let anyone push him around either." Coming from him, this was high praise indeed. Diana's journey was perhaps the most significant. With the support of her therapist, she began taking real steps toward independence and responsibility. She found steady employment at a local marketing firm, learned to budget her finances, and even started repaying some of the money our parents had loaned her over the years. "I've been watching how you handle things," she admitted during a coffee meeting 6 months after our confrontation. "You're so together, so capable. I always resented that, but now I'm trying to learn from it." "I'm not always as together as I seem," I told her honestly. "I've just gotten good at asking for help when I need it, and setting boundaries when I don't." My relationship with Rachel deepened as the months passed. She understood my family dynamics in a way few others could, helping me navigate the complex emotions that surfaced as patterns shifted and new expectations formed. When I introduced her to my family at Thanksgiving, 8 months after my appendix burst, she handled their curious questions and occasional boundary testing with grace and gentle firmness. "They're trying," she observed on the drive home. "It's not perfect, but they're making an effort." "Because I finally demanded it," I pointed out. "Yes," she agreed. "And because deep down they love you and want you in their lives. They just needed to learn how to show it in healthier ways." My professional life transformed as well. The perspective gained through my health crisis and family reckoning led me to reevaluate my career goals. I still enjoyed software engineering, but I no longer felt compelled to work excessive hours to prove my worth. I began mentoring junior developers, finding unexpected fulfillment in helping others grow their skills. Ryan, my manager, noticed the change. "You seem more present these days," he commented during a performance review. "More engaged, but also more balanced. It suits you." When a leadership position opened up in our department a year after my surgery, Ryan encouraged me to apply. The old Bernard would have hesitated, doubting his qualifications despite evidence to the contrary. The new Bernard recognized his strengths and limitations, presenting himself honestly during the interview process. When I was offered the position, it felt like recognition of who I truly was, not who I had been pretending to be. The most meaningful measure of change came during a family camping trip 18 months after my appendix burst. It had been my suggestion, a weekend at a lake where we had vacationed once when I was a child. To my surprise, everyone agreed enthusiastically. On our final evening, sitting around the campfire, my mother raised her mug of hot chocolate in a toast. To Bernard, she said, who taught us that sometimes the strongest thing a family can do is change. My father nodded in agreement, adding gruffly, "And to appendicitis for giving us the wake-up call we needed." We all laughed, the sound echoing across the still lake water. It wasn't perfect harmony, but it was authentic connection, something I had sought from them my entire life. Later that night, as Rachel and I walked along the shoreline under a canopy of stars, she asked if I had any regrets about how everything had unfolded. "I regret that it took a medical emergency for me to recognize my worth," I replied after consideration. "But I don't regret setting boundaries, even though it was the hardest thing I've ever done." "Sometimes we need a crisis to show us what really matters," she said, squeezing my hand. "Your appendix broke open, your life in ways that needed to happen." She was right. In the pain and isolation of that hospital room, watching my friends show up while my family sent beach selfies, something fundamental had shifted in my understanding of relationships. I had realized that love without respect is incomplete, that giving without receiving is unsustainable, that family should be a source of support, not constant depletion. The journey hasn't always been easy. There are still days when old doubts creep in, when I question whether I deserve to prioritize my needs, when the weight of family expectations feels heavy. But those moments grow fewer and further between, as new patterns solidify and healthier relationships flourish. What I've learned through this experience is that true strength isn't found in endless accommodation or silent suffering. It's found in the courage to stand up for yourself, to name your needs, to demand reciprocity in your relationships. It's found in the willingness to risk rejection rather than accept mistreatment. It's found in loving yourself enough to walk away from situations that diminish you, even when those situations involve the people who should love you most. Sometimes the most profound healing begins with the most painful rupture. My appendix bursting nearly cost me my life, but it gave me something infinitely precious, in return the understanding that I matter. Not because of what I can do for others, not because of what I achieve or provide, but simply because I exist. And that understanding has made all the difference. If you've ever struggled with family relationships or setting boundaries, I hope my story helps you realize you're not alone. Has anyone else experienced a health crisis that changed your perspective on relationships? Leave a comment below and share your story. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength through life's challenges. Remember, sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most meaningful connections. Thank you for listening, and take care of yourself. Both your physical and emotional health matter.